Thank you, Dr. Ann and Dr. Miao, for that excellent introduction and welcome. Excellencies, representative from the government of China, distinguished guests, partners, colleagues from the United Nations, a very good afternoon. On behalf of UN Women, let me first welcome you to this event. And I would like to also extend our thanks, heartfelt thanks to CCG, particularly Dr. Miao, Dr. Ann, and the entire team who have worked with us over the month preparing for this meeting today. As we know, today is International Women's Day, 8th of March. And it's a day to celebrate women's leadership, women's contribution to this world and to the planet. And this year's theme is Gender Equality Today for Sustainable Tomorrow. It is the global theme. Even though this celebration is taking place at a troubled time in the world, our work must go on. So let me take this opportunity to first acknowledge and honor many women in this room, outside the room, in China, and everywhere around the world, who have relentlessly contributed and worked towards betterment of the world. Today, I want to highlight about why climate change and gender. It's a question I'm often asked because sometimes the linkages are not very clear. So, forgive me if there are some data because evidence should always inform a discussion. So, we all know that the impact of climate change and environmental degradation is never gender neutral, like everything else. Women are 14 times more likely to die during a disaster than men. 80% of climate refugees around the world are women. Women make up 43% of agricultural workforce, playing a central role in biodiversity conservation, sustainable food system. But only 20% of women own land. And only about 22% of those living in rural areas in low-income countries have access to mobile phones. So one can imagine how far we are from really ensuring women can play a productive role in agricultural transformation. These statistics are telling. They indicate that women encounter structural inequalities. And what do I mean by that? Informal nature of work, informal businesses, low-paying jobs, livelihood insecurity, especially when crisis and disasters hit or when pandemic hits, like the one we're facing today. They also face high burden of unpaid care work and household work, and sometimes gender-based violence. All of these factors limiting their access to resources and information, which not only puts them more at vulnerability to deal with and to cope with climate shocks, but also if it affects their ability to participate and contribute to climate actions. And yet, this brings to my second point. The data around the world indicates that when women are indeed empowered, given the resources they need, it makes climate action more effective. UN Women did a global analysis just released last week ahead of the Commission on Status of Women, which will start very soon in a few days. And we have some data that I think is pertinent to our conversation. Number one, when women participate at the local level, it results into better outcome in natural resource management and climate interventions. Simply having more women parliamentarians elected and represented in policy making leads to adoption of more stringent climate policies, resulting in lower emissions. Including women in local forest committees, it's as simple as including them in local forest committees, improves information and communication on the need for conservation, including to convey conservation ethics to children at the community level, improves community monitoring of forest protection, and application of indigenous knowledge around biodiversity protection. However, unfortunately, and this is my third point, is that current climate actions have glaring gender gap in terms of policies, programs, and investment. Firstly, only 15% of environmental-related ministries have female minister. And why does it matter? Because the mathematics is simple. When there is low level of participation in climate governance and decision-making, it means absence of women's voice. And it means insufficient consideration on gender equality in policy-making and laws. The progress on globally agreed gender commitment under the convention, the UN Convention on Climate Change, NDCs, shows that only 20% of 122 countries identify national gender equality institution important to the climate governance, or only 27% of countries feel that women's participation is important in the agenda. That's very, we have long ways to go. If we look at the climate financing architecture around the world, most big ones, there has been some progress mentioned in terms of including gender considerations in the project design. But there is lack of data around whether or not these considerations actually bring more financing for programs to transform women's life. It's a massive challenge. SDG Agenda 2030 is about transformation. So we have a long way to go. Finally, an important point, which is very important, there is a massive data gap in terms of sex disaggregated data in the climate and environment field, which obviously affects informed policy making and investment decisions. So these are the issues and challenges. Of course, where there are challenges, there are always solutions, and I would like to propose 4 areas for our considerations. The first one, let's work together to do better in terms of analyzing, collecting, using, and disseminating gender disaggregated data and gender statistics in a systematic way. This is foundational for policy making and prioritizing investments, and to ensure that environmental policies and programs reflect emphasis for strengthening resilience and adaptive capacities of women and girls. The second is around coordination and gender mainstreaming across all sectors and all levels of government for integrated formulation and implementation of gender-responsive climate actions. This includes gender equality standards, different ministries working together, gender capacity development of governments at all levels, and adequate funding for implementation, including in international development cooperation. My fourth point is around focusing on building women's resilience, especially for women who are working in informal sector, who are most vulnerable to socioeconomic shocks. We need to focus on improving their livelihoods and income, strengthening social protection benefits, ensuring equal access to information, training, tools. And that includes climate smart agriculture, tools, and digital technology, which are still a major gap and an issue for women around the world. To better address this, one area that I really want to emphasize when we talk about resilience building is the small and medium-sized enterprise. They are the backbone of the economy. So making sure they have access to financing, that includes diverse financial instruments, concessional loan, risk guarantees, and grants. That will accelerate process for a better economic development, a recovery from COVID pandemic, but also benefit the women. The fifth area is utilizing women's real and potential capabilities in the green transition that is taking place around the world. Environmental sustainability itself could create 24 new jobs, 24 million jobs globally. And we need to invest in preparing women through upskilling and reskilling so that they are fit to deliver. And that's how we utilize the full potential of half of the world population. Finally, I see there is a tremendous and a very unique opportunity in China. At last year's COP15 in Kunming, President Xi Jinping committed to establishing $232 million fund for biodiversity protection in developing countries. Given the essential role that women play in forestry, in fishery, in land management, in water resource management, and renewable energy, this is a great opportunity to enhance targeted support towards promising women's empowerment-centric programs that are win-win. And they are win-win both for climate change, biodiversity protection, as well as for SDG 5, which is gender equality. Moreover, with China's global leadership on climate change and with the rapid economic development and progress we have seen in a number of areas, poverty alleviation, rural revitalization, digital innovation, green development, the country could truly be a model for green transition that is also gender just. And as UN Women, we stand together with our UN agencies to support all relevant stakeholders to integrate and implement gender equality commitments in climate and environmental actions towards realizing the international and national commitments and Agenda 2030. At last, I thank you, Excellencies and distinguished guests, once again for joining us today and for CCG to create this platform to have this conversation and all the logistic support to make it happen. Thank you sincerely on behalf of UN Women. We have many outstanding speakers, and I hope at the end we walk away with some consensus on critical actions to advance on these two very important interlinked global and national agendas. Thank you so much once again. 谢谢。